Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Steve Warneke Show. Thanks very much for being with us. SteveWarneke.com is the website. We want to get started today. We've been talking a lot about law enforcement distress syndrome on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, and at SteveWarneke.com. But today we have a very special guest with us, a true hero. Jeremy Scharlow is with us. He's a former police officer. I found you online on Facebook. We're both very active on Facebook because we both have left the field of law enforcement. We both are trying to move on after a career in law enforcement, and we both are trying to share our stories and help law enforcement.
That's absolutely correct.
So you were shot in the line of duty. I want to tell people briefly what happened, and then what I really want to talk about here is what happened after the incident and what it's been like for you after being involved in a critical incident, the day-to-day and the fight to get back to normal. So let's go back to May 7th on 2016 and tell us about that day.
It was a boring day to start with, just a regular patrol day. I made some arrangements with some friends to go to a movie after the shift, and state trooper friend of mine and another friend of mine. But about 10 minutes before the end of the shift, I was head back to post for shift change. Saw a vehicle with no headlights on. That's one of those things you can't just put your blinders on and turn the other way. You kind of got to go, can't say you didn't see that. I turned around, caught up to the vehicle. It pulled into a driveway, so I kind of figured I'd do the community policing thing and just, hey, your headlights are out, guy. But his brother had other plans, I guess. He was standing in the driveway there and decided to attack me.
I find so many things about this interesting. Like, you're at work, you've got plans afterwards, it's the end of the shift, it's been a boring day. One of the things that police officers talk about, and I don't think the public understands, and I say this all the time, is police work's, 98% boredom, 2% sheer terror. Here you are just gonna, as a public service, not even thinking a ticket. You end up not calling this out on the radio. You're literally just gonna get out and be like, hey man, turn your headlights on,
Yep.
And now, do you recognize the car? Do you know the driver? Do you know where you're at? Is there some history?
I knew where I was at. I was literally a block away from the police department. I mean, rounds could have hit the police department from where this occurred. It was, in fact, I took cover behind the building that was right behind the police department.
Okay. So you get out of your car, you approach them, and the brother of the drivers in the brother of the drivers in the driveway is what you said.
Yeah, actually, you jumped ahead a little bit there. I didn't actually make it out of the car. I actually just rolled the window down. I wasn't even going to get out. I just rolled the window down and was like, hey, guy. And as soon as I rolled the window down, I heard somebody yell my name and an expletive. And that put me into mode right away.
Yeah.
So I opened the door trying to get out of the car and thinking, obviously somebody was displeased with me. I knew I wasn't safe sitting in the driver's seat, so I tried to get out of the vehicle. And by the time I get out of the vehicle, he's already on top of me. I was trapped between the door and the B post as he started punching me.
So, do you recognize the guy at this point, or is it later on? No, you just...
No, I don't recognize. I didn't recognize him later until I was in the hospital, and they showed me a picture, and they're like, "Is this him?" I'm like, "Holy crap, I know him."
So you roll down your window, somebody swears at you, you realize there's an imminent attack coming, you try to get out of your car, and a guy's on top of you fighting you.
Yep.
Over a community stop to turn your headlights back on.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly.
What happens next?
So I try to block the punches, and I try to go over my radio to get help, but in the scuffle, my radio has changed channels, and so I don't get out. Nobody's coming to help me. Nobody's responding. I'm blocking with one arm up like this as he's punching, and I'm trying to use my other arm to get on the radio. I see my taser, which was down on my belt. I pull my taser, and I hit him in the chest with 2 prongs. He didn't phase him. He just kept punching me. I always used to joke about, again, a pucker moment, if somebody would walk through a taser and hear this guy, everybody wants to claim these tasers are the end all be all, and the man walked through it. He continued to punch me. Mm-hmm. So I drive stunned him and I pushed it into his chest and he pulled the trigger, and I was able to create a little bit of distance doing that. And then I was able to get out of that little corner, back up, put my arm up, and started ordering him to stop.
Okay. And then it gets even worse.
Yeah, it got real worse then. So as I'm backing up, I see him reach into his pocket and pull a pistol, a black pistol. The guy did not have, in Illinois, you have to have a FOID in order to have a weapon. He didn't have a FOID. He didn't have a CCW. He pulls a weapon from his pocket and he fires, and he hit me in my right arm, my shooting arm.
And how long from the time that you roll down the window till the time you think you're hitting the arm?
7, 9 seconds.
Yeah, that's so. It gives me goosebumps. It's so amazing how quickly things can turn to shit, right? As they always
Yeah,
say.
absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So what happens now?
So we're not 100% sure how it happened, and because the entry wound appears to be here by the smaller scar and the exit wound in the forearm, but that doesn't make sense because I never had my back to the man. Best I can tell is, and I don't recall any of this, the best we can tell is when I saw the pistol, I probably went like this, like, oh shit, took the round, brought back down, drew my pistol, returned fire. As I was backing away, I struck him in the neck and the leg.
And does he go down? Is the fight over? What happens next?
Next thing I remember, I'm kneeled down in a crouched position. My slides locked back, and I'm reloading. I see him laying on the ground. I see him get up. I didn't know I'd hit him at that time, but I knew he was on the ground. I see him get up. He went into the house, and I proceeded to look for cover. I ran towards my squad car thinking that would be the best cover. And then as I'm getting to the squad car, training kicks in again saying, hey, rounds go through cars and don't use the car as cover. Instead, I went to a building just to the the west of our location. And I pied the corner. I checked out my injury and pied the corner, started to set up a perimeter. At that point, I was able to get out of the radio. I was able to, 6 George 22 is my call sign. 6 George 22, Metcad, shots fired, I'm hit. And I had to say it twice before anybody would even responded then. And it was the longest pause in the world between telling them I was shot and somebody responding. It felt like years.
Mm-hmm. And at this moment, does the adrenaline kick in? Are you in pain? What is happening in your brain? You're just thinking, I need to get help here. Like, what's going through your head?
So I'm hiding behind this building, and we're still less than a minute into this. I'm hiding behind this building, and I do a self check real quick. I can see the big wound in the top of my arm, but I don't see the entry wound. I have my pistol in my hand still, and I can move, so I know I'm not out of the fight yet. My next thought, a wave of calm goes over me, and I knew I needed to set up a perimeter. So I pie the corner and I start to set up a perimeter and start, trying to get things in order. As I do that, I see the man exit the building, and I'm sorry, I won't use his name. I just call him the man or the suspect. But yeah. The man exits the house with an AK-47, and I look at my arm, I look at my pistol, and I said, nope.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to bring a handgun to a gunfight, right? So now here you are over this headlight in a matter of a minute. You're hit. And now he's coming out with an AK-47.
Correct.
Assuming he's trying to finish the job off.
So at that point, I duck out. I duck back behind cover to make sure he didn't see me. And he just unloads that AK-47. I don't know what he's shooting at. I don't know if he's shooting at me, but he just unloads an entire clip of that AK. Later, we find out he was trying to kill me. He thought I was in my squad car. During the investigation, multiple times he had told people that he was on the run because he knew he killed a cop.
Mm. So there was one of the officers, you work close to the police station, and I don't want to step on your story here, but one of the officers actually hears the gunshots as she's at the station, right? So she's able to also alert the other officers for help, right?
Correct. Yeah, she's actually the first on scene at that point. She was actually my relief for the shift, and she's coming to work. Just like any other day, she's, moseying on to work, and she's a block away, has her window down, and she hears gunfire on the way there. She did a really good job. I was very proud of her. She actually evac'd me out of the area, got me to safety after I was hit, and he was able to flee.
So he flees. Was there? It looked like one of the officers tried to go after him, but was unsuccessful in finding him. He fled in a truck, right? The man,
correct,
fled, and so he gets away that night. It triggers one of the biggest manhunts in the state's history for, was it 10 days or 9 or 10 days?
Yep.
Um,
I think it was a week, almost to the day, I believe.
okay. And they do end up I mean, just for closure to the people listening before we move on and talk about the aftermath of this, he ends
Mhm.
up dying in a cabin while FBI and state police have him surrounded.
Yes, he opened fire when the FBI SWAT team located a building they believed he was in. He opened fire on the FBI SWAT team. He struck a SWAT agent with the AK-47, I believe, in one or both of his arms as well. And that FBI agent had to be evac'd out of the area
Mm-hmm.
by helicopter.
So that night, what's the process? You've been evac from the area you're shot. What happens to you?
Um,
Obviously, go to the hospital, but talk about the process.
So the first thing that happens, man, is I had a buddy officer assigned to me, who was also our local union rep, and he was there. He wasn't on duty. He came in specifically to be my buddy officer. And then they shot me full of drugs.
Mm-hmm.
They took care of the pain. And what that did is it did two things, actually. Since I was under the influence, it kind of made it so if I made any spontaneous utterances or whatever under the situation, they were inadmissible because I was under the influence of narcotics. And
Well, people are like, "What is this about?" Well, so let me just set this straight. You've discharged your weapon as a police officer, so now there's an officer involved, and you've also struck the suspect. But even if you hadn't, you've discharged your firearm. That initiates an entire protocol. And I've talked about this at great length. I mean, over the course of the next months and years, you're going to have district attorneys and state's attorneys, and you're going to have civilian oversight boards and internal affairs. There's so many people that are going to examine this incident, all judging your behavior, that there are certain officer rights and protocols that take place. One of them is to put a union rep or somebody with you, that just to go through that. So that's the meaning of this.
correct.
Yeah. So because
Correct.
at that point you had hit
It's
him.
a criminal investigation. They're investigating me as a potential criminal.
Yeah,
In this shooting.
and also he could have very well died from your gunshot wounds. He didn't, but he could have.
Right.
Which then now you have the police officers use deadly force, and the same protocol would continue, right? So
Correct.
that's what
Right.
that's about.
So as part of that, I'm at the hospital. I'm being treated. They came and they did an initial interview just for safety. How many rounds did I fire? Which
Yeah.
direction? That way they can make sure there's no other people hurt.
Okay.
That's proper protocol. They then took pictures of me, my wounds, etc. They took all of my clothing, all of my possessions I had on me. They took my firearm. They took my badge. They took everything.
Yeah.
And they didn't replace it. I didn't get a gun. One of the things they preach is, make sure that officer doesn't get degraded by removing his ability to defend himself. And
yeah, I mean, in the department I work, they would also take the weapon. They're going to end up test firing it. They're going to make sure the rounds
Right.
you fired came from that. But they would give you a loaner in the meantime.
Correct.
Yeah.
I wasn't given a loaner. I ended up, luckily, I had a friend who had plenty of weapons, and I had weapons to defend myself if need be. Because as far as I'm concerned at this point, the man just, it's the same night when I get out of the hospital, he's still on the run. They haven't caught him yet. I don't know if the man wants to come back and finish the job, what he thinks. I have no idea. I'm in fear.
Well, and also a legitimate concern is who was the guy that was driving the car? Is he a friend? Is he a family member? Does the guy that you hit have family? Is he in a gang? Does he have gang members, associates? I mean, certainly there could be retaliation.
Correct.
I don't know the way we would do it in our department. Especially if you're in the hospital, you'd be assigned 24/7 police officer that would stand guard outside of your room.
Yeah, I wasn't given any of that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that your story is plagued with, unfortunately, was treatment, by your department that doesn't follow. That wasn't, what we would expect of somebody who's out protecting and serving, who is doing their job and ends up getting shot. Being on the streets and being a cop in America, which is unfortunate.
I would agree with you, and that's what I've tried to bring some attention to that. We need to look forward, and find solutions to these problems so officers don't have to struggle the way I have.
I talk about law enforcement distress syndrome, which is a lot of the daily, what you being responding to people who've been victimized and burglarized and been raped and shot and stabbed and their cars stolen and impersonated and all this that everybody you talk to, has been victimized in some way, or they were involved in an accident, or they're driving to go get coffee and they get hit by a drunk driver. And what toll does that take on a police officer's psyche over the course of a month, a year? And in my mind, and I've consulted with like some mental health professionals about what I'm calling law enforcement distress syndrome and the 8 symptoms that I've identified, they agree that it's different from PTSD. So I don't want to talk about law enforcement distress syndrome today. I want to talk about PTSD because they're, in my mind, they're separate animals. And we're seeing this media coverage, even just in this week from the Washington Post, talking about PTSD, but they're also mentioning things like cumulative trauma. They're mentioning things like the things that police officers are seeing every day. And I named it because it's important that once we name something, we can talk about it. But really, the purpose of today is I want to give people listening in the police world and outside of the police world an idea about what PTSD looks like and feels like. So, and you've been an open book online. You have a lot of people following you. You have been, the vulnerability that you've shown, and I think honestly, just the courage to put what you're feeling and what's happening, and to put what you've been through out there for everybody to see. I'm hoping has a healing effect, but also is just very brave. So I want to talk about that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. As it takes a toll, even speaking about this, I call it a hangover almost. After a speaking event, or even after a show like this, after I've talked about my event in detail, usually I'm exhausted. I don't, I'm tired. I feel like I ran a marathon, physically tired.
Mm-hmm. Officer Jeremy Scharlow is our guest. This is the Steve Warneke Show. Let's go back to the hospital that night. You're in the hospital. You're under. They've given you things for pain. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
Are you just numbed out at that point, just trying to get better, or when? Like, how are you feeling? That night and the next day.
I mean, I felt euphoric almost. Like the medicine made it so I didn't care about the pain, but I felt like I hate to say it, but I felt indestructible. I, I, the way I joked about it at the time, I matrixed the bullets and only caught one of them. Like Neo did on the. I joked around about that, and it wasn't until about a week after. So again, protocol says you're supposed to give an officer about 24 to 48 hours to rest before you interview, because it can have a negative effect on memory, etc. However, for whatever reason, the state police, I was ordered by my department to keep quiet, not to talk with anybody, no mental health professionals, no crisis debriefing, etc. I was until I spoke with the investigators from the state police. That happened to be a week later, the following Friday. I don't know a single protocol that says you should leave an officer unable to talk to anybody for an entire week.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that is. I don't know why that was allowed. I reached out multiple times asking, "Hey, I need to talk. What can I do?" And though you can't talk to anybody, it's a criminal investigation.
Mm-hmm. So, well, and what I mean, first of all, the joking police. That's how we handle what we see every day.
Oh, yeah.
Is this almost, people would say, dark, crude sense of humor, but that's like how you deal with a lot of this stuff, is to make. And I, by the way, don't think it's weird to feel invincible at all. You just got shot and got in a shootout and you survived. I mean, I think that's a normal thing to be like, holy crap, man, I'm here, and it's right. So
Yeah, I joke around now. I've had open heart surgery. I've been shot. I've had a few things that should have killed me, and I joke around, and it's actually something I talk to with my psychiatrist and psychologist regularly. And it's this feeling of I can't die. And I know logically that that is not the case. I mean,
yeah.
but sometimes I have this feeling, and I think that it's associated with one of your symptoms that you talked about, the adrenaline addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I need that in order to feel alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in that week, are you starting to have problems? Are you having trouble sleeping? Can you eat? What's this week like while you're waiting to talk to the police
Man, the
investigators?
week was 100 miles an hour. The week was 100 miles an hour. Like I felt euphoric almost. And then, eating, I don't recall eating. I know I did eat because, I mean, I did, but I don't recall eating. It's that week is a haze. I don't really recall. I just remember feeling okay.
Okay.
Um, and then that following Friday, when I came to be interviewed when I came to the police department, again, the backyard of where the shooting occurred. I get there and the chief takes me to see my squad car and what had happened to my squad car. And that's when I see that the rounds went through my MDC, through the steering column, through the back doors, through the driver's seat, and through both sides of the vehicle. I also saw they rammed the car with the truck with, or my car with his truck. I mean, there was absolutely no doubt this man was attempting to murder me.
So what symptoms of PTSD did you experience? When did they set in, and when did the darkness come?
The darkness came almost immediately after seeing that squad car. The nightmares started instantly, and that really affected my sleep. I ended up going a few weeks without sleep, and when I finally tallied it up, I was getting about 8 hours in a week period, but it was only in 20-minute increments, and it was always woken by a nightmare. So I was avoiding going to sleep. I was drinking to try to mask all those symptoms, and then I started hallucinating. That made me go to the psychiatrist, and the hallucinations, unfortunately, were directly related. I was seeing that man's image and the gun and the muzzle flash, and it was causing me to act out because they were called hypnagogical hallucinations. When your body is asleep, or your body is awake, but your mind is asleep, and you're having a nightmare. It's dangerous because you can act out the nightmares. So based on that, I decided to go get help. And that's when I decided to see a psychologist. I went to my doctor, and got a referral. And I tried to keep it away from the police department because I wanted to come back to work. But after about 5 sessions with the psychologist, it was clear that it was going to take a lot more, and I couldn't afford to pay for my own help. So we ended up going the workman's comp route.
Is there a protocol in place where where I worked after a shooting, you're required to talk to the police psychiatrist. So that is there one in
No,
place? That was not even.
no. They after I started seeing my own psychologist, they sent me to their well, they ended up sending me to 5 psychiatrists in the long run to have my psych evaluations completed, and all five that were done through the retirement board and through my attorneys indicated I had PTSD directly from the shooting. However, one workman's comp attorney indicated that I did have PTSD, but it was not due to my shooting.
I mean, I know we're here to talk about PTSD, but I mean, I can't let what you just said go by. Honestly, it's sickening and a tragedy that there's workers' comp attorneys involved trying to save the city money, getting a police officer help who's been in a firefight and been shot doing their job. And the fact that you had to sorry, go ahead.
They denied my workman's comp claim. They claimed that PTSD was not related to the shooting, and they contested it, which led the police department to fire me and me to go without income for a year, which is why my house is in foreclosure.
You did end up getting a retirement. I mean, you had to fight it. Yes. You had to fight it, but you won the case.
I did have to fight it, and I did end up winning a retirement. However, due to more events, I ended up having to evacuate Illinois. It's a shit show. I don't know any other way to say it.
God, I'm so sorry that, it's like, that's the treatment that you got after being out there doing the job that you were doing. I really am. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Thank you, sir.
How long of a road? I mean, this was the incident was back in May of 2016.
Yes.
I look back over your Facebook post, and it's been quite a transformation. Physically, you're stronger. You're in better shape.
Yeah. Yep.
Like what techniques did you do to bring yourself through this? Because a lot of this, I mean, you've had mental health counseling, but you've done some things on your own because cops are not quitters, right? We always fight till the end, and we always keep trying. That's one of the things you're taught in the academy, never give up. I think that is drilled into our heads. I think clearly it was drilled into your head because you fought through some nasty stuff. You're in good shape. So talk about what you've been doing that's helped you.
Well, the number one thing I did is I made a choice, and a lot of cops don't think of it. A lot of people don't think of it this way, but it's a choice. Do I want to live in this constant fear, misery, in this cloud of negativity, or do I want to be happy and have a chance at enjoying what whatever life I have left. Um, and it really is that simple, because if you make the choice that you want the happiness, that you want the the life, there's things you have to do. And the first thing you have to do is start taking care of yourself. And what does that mean? That means physically, it means emotionally, it means nutritionally, it means you got to build up your defenses so you can push forward. And my mental health was absolutely helped by working out. I spend about an hour a day in the gym every day. And sometimes it's running, sometimes it's lifting. At this point, I think I've lost. I'm down about 180 now, so I've lost. I was at 226.
Wow.
So yeah, I've lost quite a bit of weight there. My partner with the Relearning to Live website, she's been really helpful. She's the one who put my exercises together, and her name's Jessica Shade. She's just done a great job with the exercising, and she's the one who really taught me that exercise can lead to a better mental state.
Officer Jeremy Scharlow is our guest. This is the Steve Warneke Show. Jeremy, you touched on something there. It's a choice, and there's that. It's so easy to fall into this victim mentality, right? Where it's like, look what's happened to me, and not just you. I'm just talking about people in general. It's a trap that's easy to fall in. I've had things have come against me, and I was shot at, and I was shot, and now the department wasn't treating me well, and now I'm having to fight this battle. It's easy. To feel like things are beyond your control are coming against you, and they are. But you said this powerful thing, like, I made a choice that I wanted to move on and be happy and fix this. But, I think that's hard. That's easier said than done, because when when you're having trouble getting out of bed, and you don't have the energy, and you're not in shape, and you haven't built up that foundation, from food and exercise, to actually take those steps, man, is tough, but you did it.
Oh, absolutely.
And you must, that's the part that's really commendable. I think, in my darkest hours, right, it's really tough to get moving, but I agree with you. And I've written a lot about diet, exercise, and just overall health. And we usually neglect mental health. So counseling is part of that, but it's all like this, the body's one unit, right? So, everything that I talk about, you're talking about, even though we never even met until today, right? I messaged you on Facebook, and this is the first time we've ever spoken, and we're out talking about the same things, because we're cops that have, we've been through very different things, but we've both learned how to keep putting one foot in front of the other and do it with the best possible results, right?
Correct. Yeah. You were mentioning those dark times, and that's when it's really important for you not just to rely on yourself, and you got to look to your brotherhood for help. At that time, I was feeling abandoned, like you mentioned, by the police department. I'd felt like everything was down, and the organization, Operation Enduring Warrior, reached out to me. Their logo's right here on my shirt. I've done a couple events with them now. They're going to be honoring me in New Jersey as an honoree for Task Force Sentinel. And then I'll be in Houston a couple weeks from now to do some outreach at Camp Hope in Houston, Texas. It's another PTSD event for veterans to raise money for interim housing and mental health. So I've taken what I've found, and the biggest thing aside from exercise that has helped me is finding something bigger than myself to focus on. And to me, that's helping these other officers who maybe don't have the resources that I have to go out and get the help they need. I want to find a way to make sure that no officer suffers the way that I have.
One of the things I talked about in one of the last presentations I gave was this, we're also facing with losing this identity, loss of power when you leave the job. And it's a difficult transition, especially in law enforcement, where it becomes, your vocation becomes just such a big part of you, that to leave that behind is difficult to move on from. It's difficult to adapt to civilian life, I think.
Absolutely. One of the first things in transitioning into a civilian job, which didn't really last a whole long, but at any rate, one of the things I had a problem with is people were allowed to say no. I didn't understand. Like, I didn't understand. Hey, go do this. you should just go do it. What's the argument about? I don't understand. And so, so a lot of times, you know, when I was giving people, hey, I lacked the pleasantries. I wouldn't be like, I wouldn't say, hey, could you please go do the dishes? I'd be, hey, you dishes. They didn't like that very much.
Oh my. You know, I talk about hypervigilance, which is a symptom I've identified in law enforcement distress syndrome, and that's one of the overlap things that occurs with PTSD. Hypervigilance is a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder, and one that, you know, I think can, when you're trying to exercise and eat right and have the energy to get better, wasting energy being overly vigilant with the belief that if you're not on guard 24/7, 365, even at home, it's counterproductive because you're spending energy you need to get better, you know, in the sense that it's not helping you. I mean, obviously we talk about reasonable precautions, like let's not walk down an alley in New Orleans at 2 a.m., you know, like we're going to get mugged. But I'm talking about when vigilance becomes hypervigilance, and when it also permeates its way into your home and your private life and those things.
There's still days. For example, one of the ways you talked about not being able to get out of bed, and when you're so depressed and so down that, you know, getting out of bed is a task that it just seems insurmountable. And one of the things I did to combat that is I created routines, and you know, and we're trained muscle memory. If you do something 1,000 times, you know, over 3 months or whatnot, it will become so ingrained that it's second nature, and you take away the reaction time, etc. It's Killology discusses it. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman discusses it. It's a concept that I believe I took and I translated it to my civilian life. I created these routines, and I've done them so many times now that laying in bed is not an option anymore, because now it feels out of the ordinary because it's not in my routine.
Can you have an example?
So the current routine, I get up. I get up every morning about 6:30, 7 o'clock, to the gym by 8. I work out usually about an hour to an hour and a half. Then from there, I usually go to a coffee shop near where I'm staying right now. I'm staying with family right now. I'm currently homeless, I guess is a bit way to put it, because of the threats against my life in the town I lived in. So I do have an appointment or an apartment that'll be coming available November 8th. So it's just a temporary thing. But you were talking about more stresses involved after the fact. That's another one. The man's father has decided he wants to kill me now. So. But at any rate, I go to the coffee shop, and then I dedicate all of my time to creating content and learning more about PTSD and its associated symptoms, and looking for ways to find help for officers who need it. So that's become my number one goal.
You know, redefining that purpose is so important. So if you're, and I think the thing that was so amazing is, and the reason I was so drawn to what you've done is, both of us have decided to make our purpose to help law enforcement, even though we're no longer in the biz, right? So yeah, that's why we hooked up. So Jeremy Scharlow, our guest. Jeremy, anything you want to add, or where can people find you, get a hold of you, see your stuff? Where do you want to direct them?
Well, I have a website. It's called relearningtolive.com. I also am on Facebook, Officer Jeremy Scharlow, retired. I put that retired on there because I had a couple people saying that since I was no longer a police officer, I was a poser. And so I added the retirement just to, I guess, take that argument away. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. So feel free to reach out. You know, I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I know a whole bunch of people who may be able to help, and I can put you in touch with somebody.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much for your time, and I look forward to doing more with you. Hopefully we can partner together on some things, and best of luck with everything. If you need me, I'm here.
Thank you, sir.
All right. We'll stay in touch. All right. Thanks for being with us. All right, everybody, that does it for the Steve Warneke Show. Thanks very much for being with us. More at stevewarneke.com, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all over the place. YouTube as well. This video will be put on all of those. Thanks very much for your time. If you have any questions or need anything, please feel free to reach out. We'll see you next time, everybody. Take care.